he shares Scott shares on his Facebook page some of his most amazing pictures of birds. So we know that you're out there. I watched your post about traveling to Japan, and I learned new terminology just reading his simple Facebook post. So I was really impressed with the things that Scott knows and the amazing photos that he has captured. So tell us about bird watching. Scott, go ahead.
So I click on share screen. Is that what I do?
You go,
Share.
yes, the green one's share screen.
Okay. And then, okay. Okay, is that, anybody see it?
Yeah.
Okay, good, good, good. All right, yeah, well, okay, so yeah, this is, welcome to my presentation. It's about bird watching. And I'll just quickly end kind of my story. So as a young boy in Toledo, we did have a book of birds, and I did have an interest then, but then I lost it over many, many years. And about 40 years later, a Scottish friend of mine in Taiwan sort of kept inviting me down to a county called Yilan in the eastern part of Taiwan, and to look at some birds in the rice fields. And I was doing that and enjoying it, but I thought it'd be better if I knew what the birds were. So then I started to try to learn about birds. And then after that in Toledo, I was joined in I had a cycling group. I was part of that. And I asked if anybody knew about bird watching, and a very nice lady in the group told me about the Swan Creek Metro Park Window on Wildlife. And they had a weekly gathering at that time. So I joined them, and then I met a very nice lady named Sherry Plessner, who's very active in birding in this part of Ohio. And that's really when I got much more interested in it and followed it. Okay. In terms of just quick bird watching tools, of course, eyes and ears are the most important ones. Binoculars are, you might be surprised how helpful they are. They look kind of weird, but they are helpful. Cameras are increasingly becoming very important in bird watching. And I'll take a notebook, although not many people do these days. Field guides are at least one would be very helpful. Telescopes are popular, but they're kind of heavy and awkward, and I would say not, people don't take them that often. And then there's something called eBird, an app called eBird, which I'll talk about later. Okay. And then why become a birder? I mean, for me, it was friendship. I mean, my friend invited me down, and then very nice people who engage in birding. So it's a good way to meet some friends, new friends. And my finding is that bird watchers tend to be very easygoing, friendly people. They're very patient. You can't, helps to be patient if you're a bird watcher. But then also it became interesting to me how many species we actually have just around us. There's something called urban birding, which is just at your house or in your neighborhood. And I think we've got cardinals and sparrows and robins. But actually, there's probably, if you went to a park nearby your house, you probably could find 15 to 20 species in your park if you kind of became a more practiced bird watcher. And then new places to visit. I'll talk about this a bit more. I mean, helps in my travels. And then good lifestyle, and also citizen science is becoming more important. I'll continue here. So in terms of species you might find, last Friday, there's a weekly bird watching group in Toledo at the Woodlawn Cemetery. I don't know if you're familiar with the cemetery. Very beautiful historic cemetery. They meet every Friday morning at 9, do a 90-minute walk. And we recorded 30 species just in the 90-minute walk. And I mean, that's a pretty high number, but like I said, if you go with a group to another type of park, probably they're going to find 15 to 25 species. And here's a few photos from it's hard for me. I post photos on Facebook, but I'm not very good at managing them. So where they are, I don't know. But anyways, these photos are from Friday. So here's a Cooper's hawk at the cemetery, and then a male wood duck. This is the best part of the year because all the birds are in their breeding colors. So the wood duck in the fall is not a very attractive duck really, but in the spring they're marvelous. And a hooded merganser. So this is the first time I photographed a hooded merganser, and again in their breeding colors. And this is a pine siskin, which is what we call a lifer in birding. And I think that's the one term that people need the most explanation for. So what are lifers? And a lifer is when first time you record seeing a bird. So that pine siskin, I'd never recorded seeing a pine siskin before. So we call that a lifer. And that maybe doesn't sound too exciting at first, but as you get involved in bird watching, getting lifers becomes kind of exciting, part of the enjoyment. And you could also say a lifer for a location, like for Ohio, it's a Ohio lifer for me. The first time I recorded seeing it in Ohio, or a 2024 lifer, the first time I've seen it this year, or something like that. So you can say lifers for other descriptions, but the main one would be first time in your life ever seeing it. So how do we keep track of what's a lifer, what's not a lifer? So as I mentioned, ebird.org is an excellent app. And I think almost all the people I know, almost all of them use this app to record their outing, what they see during their outings and their photographs. And I think it's probably the most widely used one in the world right now. And it's sponsored by Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And it has a lot of different tools that can make bird watching more fun and interesting. So after you do a 2-hour walk in a park, you write them down maybe, or you remember them, take some pictures, and then you can put in the submitted checklist to eBird to see what you saw. So here's an example for Woodlawn Cemetery. And they ask you some questions at the beginning so they know the day and the date and the time and where you went. And then they'll give you this list. And then you just put in 1, 2, 3, 4, how many of each of these species that you think you saw. And if you think you saw something that's not on the list that's unusual, you can do that, but then they'll ask you to submit more information, because if it's an unusual thing, they would like more certainty that you actually saw that species. And then after you complete this list, you can do another submission for adding media, and that's where you can add photographs of the birds you saw during your visit. So this is the basic checklist. And then another tool they have is illustrated checklists. So for each hotspot, each birding location, each state, each county, each country, every type of designation, they'll have this checklist. And the dark blue shows someone observed, or the percentage of times that people observed this species in this location, on that date. So it has all these dates. So you can kind of see what birds should probably be in this location when I went there, to help narrow down your ID process. Like it should be one of these 3 or 4. And then you can see Scott Weaver, this is from my, what you call a home one, that Linong wetlands, really close to my house in Taiwan. So people rate the photos, and if your photo is rated number 1, so those 3 photos are all my photos that get to be in the illustrated checklist for this particular hotspot. So that's another, I think, fun thing that people enjoy, seeing their photos selected to be the photo for that particular bird at that particular location. And then here's the hotspots. So all these little dewdrops are hotspots that have been created within eBird. And I typed in Clark County, if I remember correctly. And so that Montgomery is Dayton, Ohio, down to the lower left. And then Clark is up here, Springfield. And so I'm going to be going down to visit the United States Air Force Museum. But while I'm down there, I thought I will also do a little bird watching. So I think, what's that? Okay. So if you look up Springfield, this dark red, the darker red, more species were seen at that location. So that dark red one is Buck Creek State Park in Clark County, which I never had heard of before. But I said, well, that looks like a good place to go and visit. And then I look up Springfield and I find a bed and breakfast. There seems to be a very nice bed and breakfast there. So all of a sudden I have a good trip planned, museum plus bird watching, to a place that has a lot of birds. And usually those locations are beautiful locations. If a place has a lot of birds, there's probably something special about it that makes it particularly nice, my finding it. So good kernel to get me started. Okay, and then this is another one. This is my profile page, and then you've got the world, and they color in the countries depending on how many birds you've recorded in those countries. So obviously my number 1 is Taiwan, way off to the west there, or east, sorry, way off to the east. And then the United States is number 2 for me. And then you can fill in the countries as you visit them. And then you can click down to Ohio. So Lucas is my home base. That's where I've seen the most birds. And then hopefully this trip, maybe I'll visit at least Clark County, maybe Champaign and Montgomery, depending how the time goes, and try to fill in 2 or 3 counties. And my hope is one day I'll be able to fill in every county in Ohio and visit all of them with a birding survey in each of the counties. I did that already in Taiwan. I've completed all of the states and counties in Taiwan already. Okay. And then, so this is like the traveling part that I enjoy about bird watching. So I like to travel and I like local history, but if I didn't have a reason to go somewhere, I probably would just stay at home. But I start by thinking, I'd like to go do some bird watching and do another county. Well, what's in that county to visit? So I look for hot spots, where to visit, go birding, and then I look, are there other things to do in that county? So if not for birding, I probably wouldn't be making a trip to Clark County, but now I am. Okay. And then for healthy lifestyle, I do think it's also good for me personally because I'm slightly on the heavy side, and good for me to get out and do walking. But again, I'm probably not the person who would just go out and walk in a park. I'd probably watch TV. But when I see a nice day and I think, well, there's probably a lot of birds to be seen, I'll get out of my house and go, or apartment, and go to a park and walk around and do a couple hours of bird watching. So it does a lot for getting me out of the house and doing some exercise and getting some fresh air. So, and also, I think, if I'm anxious about something or worrying about something, I do find that going bird watching for a couple hours helps me kind of put things in perspective and relax. And as I said, maybe get my blood pressure down. It just seems the world is more simple out there when you're just kind of listening to the birds and watching the birds and taking some pictures. And it just seems to relax things a bit. Okay. And I'd say it's interesting how your skills develop. If you go bird watching with experienced birders, and I think in everywhere wherever we live, there's groups that go bird watching that you can join. But people who have been doing it for a while, I think you might be surprised how good they are at seeing birds and hearing birds and identifying them. And it doesn't come right away, but it does come if you just keep practicing a bit. It's amazing how your skills kind of develop. And I don't know if it's something to do with our hunter-gatherer background from many years ago, but all of a sudden you're noticing every little twitch in the trees or something that sticks out in a tree that doesn't look normal. Maybe not a leaf, that's maybe a bird. And you can hear the birds and you can learn their behaviors. Like, well, this looks like a place where a bird might be, you might be able to find a bird. For example, clearings, because of differences from a forest going into a clear area tends to be a good area because the birds have 2 different environments they can move between. So you do learn a lot of different things. And I think, again, it's interesting for me that you can, it's not, I think it comes to everybody. If you just do a bit of bird watching, all of a sudden you become very sensitive to the birds. Okay. And that will improve. And again, learning about bird behavior is also helpful to learning about the birds. Okay. And zoom cameras, I do think, have changed things a lot because in the old days, you just write down what you think you saw. The cameras really couldn't capture birds very well unless they were really right in front of you. But with big zoom lenses and digital technologies, you can get very close-up pictures of birds that are actually quite far away and much easier to identify them. And when you get home, also, you have something that you can look in the field guide and compare it against to see the ID marks. So I do think this really transformed bird watching basically over the past 20, 30 years. And you can field guides, eBird is helpful, but I do find it exciting and interesting to figure out what bird is this. Often I won't know what species it is that I took the picture of, and I'll have to figure it out when I get home. And there are apps that you can put the picture in called Merlin that will maybe give you a suggestion what bird that might be. And there's also Merlin that you can walk and it will listen to the sounds of the birds as you're walking on your bird walk and tell you what birds are calling or what they think is calling. It may not always be accurate, but what they think, what the app thinks it's hearing. So there's lots of kind of new technologies that have made it, I'd say, more interesting as a hobby. Okay, so if you can get the zoom, helps you get, especially birds that are, I mean, not especially, but including birds that are the raptors soaring high, you can get a much clearer and closer picture than you would have been able to get 20, 30 years ago. If that's an osprey flying over a cemetery, woodlawn cemetery. And then eBird itself has reviewers that are very helpful. So you submit the checklist, but they are very concerned about quality control. They don't want people putting in a lot of garbage information. So especially if there's photos involved, I think they review every photo because as I say here, many times I've received emails from the reviewer saying, you said you saw this, you said this was a spotted sandpiper over in type A, but actually we think it's a green sandpiper. So then you just change the species. So there's people helping you also by looking at it and giving you corrections. And I always appreciate that. They do it in a nice way. Don't say, that you idiot, that's a green sandpiper. Okay. And then lastly, citizen science. So because everyone is around the world is submitting checklists to eBird, and it is a global system, then they can begin to put together some things such as migration routes and populations. Well, where are people seeing these birds over the months of the year? And they can come up with some very interesting diagrams showing the migration patterns of birds. And with that, not only where do they winter and summer, but also where do they travel to get between those two places? How do they do that? And this gives us a chance to focus on vital pathways and habitats for the bird, because unfortunately, I think this is one of the things that's hurting the birding populations. There's a place called, I forget the name, the Bohai Bay, which is North Korea and China, southern China. And it's a pretty critical and traditionally undeveloped area that the birds would use to migrate through. And unfortunately, it's becoming, as you might guess, more economically developed, and habitat destruction is one of the key problems for birds. And hopefully this kind of data will help us at least hopefully address this issue and keep some habitats that we need. Okay, I think that's the last one. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions. Stop share, okay. Okay, there we are.
Oh my gosh, that was fantastic. So Ken asked when you got back to Ohio, but he missed you saying that you were just back a couple days before the earthquake. Does anybody have any questions about birding? Chuck.
I actually do, and this is going to sound really strange, and I don't know if I can totally explain it, but there are birds all over my yard. But there's one that pretty much has a black body, but around the neck, it's blue-ish.
Where do you live?
I live in the Cleveland area, so it would have to be native to Northern Ohio, Northeast, wherever I live. Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I'm more familiar with Taiwan birds, but
Oh, okay.
I mean, maybe a grackle. Sometimes they will have a bluish neck and they're dark with a bluish sheen. Maybe a grackles.
Well, I would have no idea because I don't know, but
Okay.
I did see one the other day who but stood on my on a railing by my deck and puffed his body out. I figured he was trying to attract a female.
Okay, yeah, sounds like
That
it.
help at all, or
Fairly
I-
large
no.
birds. I mean, yeah, to me, it kind of sounds like grackles, perhaps. They're fairly aggressive birds, not shy.
That's fun.
Okay.
Chuck had a question, and Chuck, go ahead.
Yeah, Judy was using Merlin last summer and I didn't know it. And I happened to sneeze and it identified me as a great blue heron. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, this is very true because you can't always trust Merlin to be accurate. It's trying, but it makes a lot of mistakes. And it doesn't really work in Taiwan. There's some locations where they just tell you up front it's not working. It doesn't work very well here. But in the United States, it does work. But as we're walking along, yeah, you can't just say, well, Merlin said there's a white-throated sparrow, so we're going to check that as we've seen that. No, it's because it's not that, the quality control isn't that good. So it gives you hints like, okay, it's hearing this. Is anybody else hearing this? Or can we see this bird? And then, or you may hear a bird calling and it will help give you an idea, maybe it's this species. So yeah, it's not a foolproof thing. And I'm not surprised.
I think that's hilarious.
Great blue heron.
Well,
It
I
may
shouldn't take
not
it
be
personally
that far off. It may have been doing a very good job because a great blue heron does kind of sound like it, when it's startled and it takes off, it is kind of a cough or a sneezy
yes.
kind of guttural sound.
Yes.
So it may have been a good best guess.
That's
And
right.
I
It is.
think he resembles him and, you know.
Yeah, it's kind of a guttural, loud, rough sound usually that they would make. That's right. So it kind of could be like a kind of that, or might confuse it.
Steve had a question.
Okay.
Yeah, what's your rarest or most exciting sighting so far?
Okay. I think a couple of years ago, and I was with my friend in the Danche River, the delta there, the mouth of the river, and spoonbill was flying above us. And with the zoom, we could tell, well, there's a spoonbill, which is rare in itself. But then when I took the pictures home and looked at the pictures, there's no black face. So usually we would see the black face spoonbill. And so this was actually, it was a good picture, thankfully, a Eurasian spoonbill, which is the only time in my life I've ever seen one. And so that was, I think, the most exciting one. And especially a good picture of one flying. That was great.
Very cool.
And those are big birds. The bigger the better. Yeah.
I think it's amazing that you go to different continents. Like the birds are so totally different that you would have to start all over again. I mean, structurally, their beaks and shapes would put them in families, I'm sure, but still, they're so very different.
Yeah, and the only kind of overlap you get is maybe the ones that are by water because they can go around the world. So the osprey you'll see in Taiwan as well as in Toledo. Not too many though. Great egret, a few of those. I mean, there's a few, but most birds are different. We don't have hummingbirds in Asia, so I think we mentioned that before. I think I heard that from Ray. Anyway, yeah, no hummingbirds, but there's warblers in both places, but they were divided millions of thousands of years ago. They're quite different. And so yeah, when I come back to Toledo, it takes a while to remember what are our birds here. That's true. There's not that much overlap between those two continents, between Taiwan and Ohio. Is quite different.
So
And then if you went to South America, it's totally, or Australia, it would be totally different again.
Yeah. Yes. South America would be a good one. Yeah.
Steve?
Have you gotten to spend much time in McGee Marsh up there near Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge?
Last year, because that was the first time I was ever here during the warbler migration, the spring warbler migration, which is the good one, when they're in their breeding colors. And so this year I'll be here again for that. And I'll definitely go up there for that. I mean, it's a bit of it's crowded, and not everybody enjoys the large numbers of people. There's kind of scrambling along. But anyways, and they ask, but it's interesting, and I'll go again for sure. I mean, I don't go all the time just because it can be like a lot of people there. But it's for you may not know, this part of the world is one of the best parts of the world for birding in late April because the warblers that are coming up from Central and South America go around Lake Erie up as they're going to Canada. So we get an amazing concentration of warblers migrating through about 3 weeks of the year from late April, early May. So it's called the biggest week in American birding or something. So our Northern Ohio is quite special for that feature. So I'll definitely go there this year, yes. Again. Last year was the first time.
Our district conference will be just at the beginning of that great migration, and you can just go out into the parking lot and adjacent areas from the conference, and you'll be able to see a lot right there.
Yes. What park is it in again, the conference? I forgot.
Maumee Bay Park?
Yeah. So that's a good, excellent place too. Yeah. All those little, I mean, McGee is the most famous, but that whole area along the southern lake there is all of it.
Hey, Ray, do you know if they fixed or Cindy might know, have they repaired the boardwalk? Used to be able to do a lot of great birding on the boardwalk, but I know it had some storm damage a year or two ago, and I'm not sure if they've gotten that repaired yet.
At Maumee Bay State Park, you mean?
So McGee Marsh has a 1 mile boardwalk through the marsh and thicket that is the magnet. You will see.
I was thinking of the state park where the conference is. I think that's the one that gotten taken out by the tornado.
Yeah, that I don't know. It's been a couple of years since I've been up there.
Not sure either myself. But even
if you-
McGee had
if-
some
yeah.
damage, one from a storm, but I think they did repair it.
Yeah. But that's a neat place because they've got some nice, when they repair that, they've got some really nice overlooks along there that are good to hang out in.
Yeah, I think one of our I'm in a group called Mommy Valley Adventures that also does walks. I think we went out that way as well. Is it kind of there's a lot of water. It kind of reminds you of being in the big Great Black Swamp, whatever. Yeah.
Yep.
So some
Yeah,
of it
the
at least is
overlooks were,
walkable.
the overlooks were always the drink box breaks for Will and Jack when they were little. So that's how I remember the boardwalk.
Any other questions for Scott? Bob Cook has a question, but you're on mute.
I really don't have a question, but Scott, thank you for the presentation. I found it interesting and it was delightful because it's something I'm interested in too. And I wanted to just tell everybody, if you're looking for a movie some evening, you might look up The Big Year. And The Big Year is a funny movie with Jack Black and Steve Martin, who enter the competition to see more birds than anyone else in a given year. And all the things they get into as they try and build their list, it gets kind of funny, and you might enjoy it.
I haven't seen it. I've heard about it. I have to see it. I just have to guess. Maybe this summer is the summer.
Well, on a cloudy day.
All right.
Jim
Jim.
has a question, I think.
Yeah, great presentation, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know Ray and Scott are birders. I am a bird watcher, and there is a distinct difference. And really just become interested since we moved to where we are now, where we have the woods and the open area, and put up several feeders. But my specific question is, I'm infatuated with bluebirds, and I've just recently started to attract them in. What kind of advice could you give me to nurture them and have them hang around?
Ray, I'm interested in a lot of, like, Wood County has bluebird counters, and so I know building a box is a good thing because they will breed in those boxes. Ray, do you have any other suggestions?
Yeah, I think that would be the main thing, is that you provide a nesting box, and there are specifications for bluebird nesting boxes. And it takes some management because there are other birds that may go in to use that box, and you kind of got to open up the lid and go in there and evict the interlopers so that you can allow that space for the bluebirds. So yeah, you do that, but maybe you want to put up 5 or 10 boxes so that you can have some of the swallows that are bound to come to them, which are great birds to have anyhow, and let half of them be occupied by swallows, and then reserve the other half for the bluebirds. And other than your feeders, they'll take advantage of that. But yeah, managing the nesting boxes is the big thing. And Black River Audubon has a huge effort for that. They've got like 500 boxes in Lorain County that they constantly monitor and manage.
Right, I've copied their design. I put 3 of them up.
Oh,
But, yeah, I'm hoping, and they come by, they've looked at them. I've watched them land and look, but I don't know if anybody's moved in yet, so.
Yeah, and then there's like critter guards that you put on the post
Right.
so that the raccoons can't climb up there.
and as far as food, I think grubs, are they fond of grubs if you have a feeder? I don't know.
Yeah, I've had the dead grubs, but they don't seem to be attracted to that. I think they're gonna have the live grubs pretty soon.
If you watch bluebirds feed, they're often just jumping down to the ground and picking things up out of the lawn.
Yeah.
That's how they feed, rather than up in the, bushes getting berries and stuff, and, bugs in the bark. They're on the ground. So, having some open ground for them to feed on, you've got some of that. So,
Mhm.
that's gonna be a good environment for them.
Bob Cook has another question.
Well, I just wanted to tell everybody that if you haven't seen it, but Elda was kind enough to put a program online that I'd recommended on falconry. And since we're in a bird venue, it might be something you'd be interested in seeing, because it really shows a young lady who has manned a kestrel. And it's just a real cute thing. Maybe you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I did see that posting for that video. Anyway, yeah. Yeah.
Chuck, go ahead, Chuck.
What's your take on feeding birds year round?
That was my question too.
Was it?
Yes.
And maybe Ray can give his commentary as well. From all that I've heard is that, there is a concern that it makes them dependent on humans. But from everything that I've heard, people feel, especially during the winter, it's good to provide them food. It doesn't make birds too dependent on human beings. And even during the summer, it provides them with extra food and calories, which is good. So everything that I've heard from my birding friends is that they think having feeders is a very good thing. And there's not very much. There was concern when there was spread of avian flu that it provided them they were coming together like that, and then they were spreading avian flu. So you have to clean them very well, for sure. If you have a dirty feeding station, I think that can lead to spreading of disease. That's my understanding. And Ray, do you have any comments on that?
Well, yeah, one of the main things is that if you start feeding in the fall, especially, you want to continue, because you may be preventing some local birds from migrating because they've got food. So they're not going to fly away if there's food. But then you don't want to trap them, in a northern range where they wouldn't normally be, stop feeding them, and then they would suffer, or maybe not say, oh, well, hey, this has gone dry, I'm going to go fly south now. That may be a bad scenario. So if you start, continue is the other thing. And of course, my passion right now is native landscaping and pollinator gardens, but also the landscape itself can be the fuel for birds to stay and feed. So if you've got a variety of native plants that are producing the nuts and the seeds and the habitat for grubs and things like that, then that could be your feeder. That could be your what enhances the bird life. Is just the plant life, and the things that feed on the plants then support the birds.
Yeah,
We have
so it's
problems
natural
with-
feeders. Yeah.
We have issues with bears in the summer destroying the feeders.
Oh.
So be it.
Bears win.
Bears win. Yeah.
Bears
Yeah.
win.
Well, when back in the day when I used to be a backwoods backpacker, there were some places I'd go where you had to take your food and put it in a bear bag and string it from a tree up out of reach. So that might be the solution. If you're going to put suet out and it's at eye level, yeah, something's going to come and get it other than the birds. But, maybe putting it up out of reach, the birds can still take advantage of it, and the bears will be frustrated.
How are you birders doing with attracting purple martin?
Ray.
Around here, if you build it, they will come. There are a number of places that have these huge purple martin nesting structures where there's dozens of these gourd-shaped nesting structures on an umbrella-like structure where the whole thing can be lowered and cleaned in the winter and that sort of thing. There's a couple up at Lakeview Park along Lake Erie that have been very successful for decades. It's just a matter of managing it well, and they'll take advantage of it.
The Amish are really good at that. They have huge stations on their farms or by their gardens. So, I am interested in proposing a service project for the month of April that has some benefit to the birding population. So what would be your recommendation to us in our little niches around the world? What do you recommend that we do to improve the populations in our areas? I know what Ray's going to say. He's going
I
to say,
love Ray's. I'm also a fan of Ray's project. To me, that's the most interesting thing. I mean, if you can find a place, I'm still trying to do it, and I haven't been successful yet. Where you find a place to plant some pollinator plants and that type of thing, and Ray's the expert on that. I mean, if that wouldn't be you could do it in a day. It takes a little bit of research, I'd say, and planning. But Ray, any comments on that? I think that would be the best thing.
Well, I plant sunflowers just for the finches, and then I get goldfinches that come and clean them out. I leave them up there until the head is barren, in late summer. So it's wonderful. You get this, brilliant flower, this dense head that is a joy to see, and then the seeds develop, and then you get these beautiful birds that come and steal all the grain. And there's a lot of win-win in that sort of thing. And the same thing with things like purple coneflower. You leave the seed heads, you don't deadhead, which is what people want to clean things up. Oh, it's done blooming, I got to cut off that seed head and get rid of it, because all I want is the beautiful flower petals to look at. I don't want that it's in decline, it's in decay, it's old, and who wants old? Yeah, well, the birds want the old, the maturing. So yeah, it's dropped the petals, but there's still a great deal of value in what is left. And that's true of many of the native perennials that you can have in your yard, is that, the seeds is one of the big sources of enhancing the environment, is that, you're feeding the birds.
so Ray, when is the best time to plant sunflowers or coneflowers?
Coming up very soon, purple coneflowers it's a good time to get those perennials in the ground, and many of them, if you get them at a garden center, that's in a 4-inch pot or bigger, it may bloom the same year. So that's really good. Sunflowers are a warm season kind of annual, so you got to plant those each year from seed.
All right, so here's my challenge. So my challenge is to either plant sunflowers or purple coneflowers. Now these are for the people that are in Ohio-ish. So we do have people obviously that are not in our zone that are in this call, but if you could research for your own area, if you don't fit into our zone, or you don't have that type of cone flower or sunflower type flower, if you could research that and plant them, because they do seed down. A lot of them will come back much greater in the future. So
well, sunflowers, which is native to our Kansas, to the prairies of North America, is now grown all around the world, And for those of you who are sympathetic to the Ukrainians, their national flower is the sunflower.
Huh.
So they have taken the North American plant and made it a commercially viable agricultural crop like nobody else has. And it has been so important to the Ukrainians that it has become their national flower.
Wow.
So,
I had no idea.
plant a sunflower for Ukraine.
All right, so plant of sunflowers, or if you
Yeah.
want something smaller, then you can choose those coneflowers. But
And there's hundreds of varieties.
yeah, there really are. That's right. All right, well, Scott, thank you so much. That
Thank you
was
all.
so
Thank you all for your
fantastic.
attention. Thank you. My
I
pleasure.
loved it, and I know most of us are super interested anyway, and even it was fabulous, full of information. So thank you.